It's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to another edition of Q&A with the coach. Our friend Patrick sends in the first question. He says, I got knocked down today in sparring by a hard right on the nose. My head flew back like a whiplash and I dropped down. Afterwards, I started searching around for information on knockdowns. Unfortunately, most, if not all, that I've found talks about knockdowns being a result of losing consciousness while I was conscious the whole way down. I also had no problems moving afterward and could have gotten up directly if I had wanted to, which of course I didn't. What can you tell me about knockdowns without loss of consciousness and recovery from them? Well, Patrick, my friend, that is the most common thing that is deemed a knockout in combat sports. Believe it or not, most people who are knocked out don't actually go unconscious. They fall down after a heavy shot lands, and the referee, in the best interest of the fighter, stops the fight under the pretense that that fighter is no longer able to intelligently defend himself. This happened to me the first time I got knocked out in my first pro Muay Thai fight. The guy came in, lambasted me with a heavy combination. He hit me on the chin. I went down. I was fully conscious of everything that was happening. And the referee jumps in and stops the fight. And that little proud part inside of me was thinking, well, I wasn't really knocked out. I was still conscious. I could have gotten up if I really want. You know, all these things we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel like men. To spare our sensitive feelings. When the reality is you just got rocked. Your brain just took some damage. Because you don't lapse into a coma doesn't mean there's no concussion. Because you don't lapse into a coma does not mean that you're not hurt, that no brain damage has taken place. So one of the big problems I have with rounds in combat sports. Rounds were a well-intentioned rule included into boxing way back when they first started adding rules to boxing, and then by boxing tradition were added into the sport of mixed martial arts. I think rounds need to go. In a big part, for the safety of the fighters. Why? Why? How many fights have you seen where, MMA fights I'm talking about specifically, where the guys were throwing punches, one got clipped, he goes down, the other guy jumps on him, throws some more punches, the guy on the bottom seems to come back to life and, survive until the bell rings. And then he kind of gets a mulligan after the round. He gets a break, time to recover. As if anybody could recover from a concussion in 1 minute. And then he comes back and sometimes he loses and sometimes he wins. But every time he takes additional brain damage. In a situation where if there were no rounds, he would not have, because the fight would have been over. And would have been declared a knockout or a technical knockout. You've seen fighters like Mark Hunt, Michael Venom Page, these knockout artists, these walk-away knockout artists who hit their opponent with a heavy strike. He falls down and they just walk away with their hands up like, look at that, I just won. It's pretty awesome, right? Man, it's such a crowd-pleasing move. Once in a while you'll see fights like this where the guy tries the walk-away knockout, hits the guy, he falls down, and then the guy on the ground manages to get up and pounce on him again, but it's kind of shocking how many guys can come back to life if the fight is allowed to continue just a little bit longer. Again, how many MMA fights have you seen where a punch knocks a guy down, his eyes start rolling back in his head, but immediately the top guy pounces on him, trying to finish him, and in that time interval he just comes back to life, it seems. Happens a lot. Like a whole lot. So what's actually happening here? Let's take a closer look at some of your questions. You've looked on the internet looking for information about what's happening when you get knocked down. A couple things are happening. It depends on where you got hit, how you got hit, your brain bouncing around in your head, getting hit in the the temple or the ear, disrupting your inner ear and your equilibrium, getting hit in the chin, and getting your head whipped around, getting hit. You mentioned you got hit in the nose. So a couple of things are happening there. That's activating hundreds of nerve clusters in your face and your head and your brain, causing all kinds of adverse reactions. The least of which is, your head getting snapped back and you falling down, man. What I'm trying to say, long story short, it's not good. It's not good. And it's a good thing that you took a break after that. You could have got up and kept sparring, sure. Sure. Just like in that movie Rocky, where Apollo Creed could get up and face Ivan Drago again. And what happened to him? He died. And it's a work of fiction, but that sort of thing happens in real fights. It has happened. Now, a couple of years ago, man, how many boxers died? A bunch. Too many. Too many. Just recently, forget the fighter's name, dude was fighting in the bare knuckle fighting championship. Like 30 seconds into the fight, he got clipped with pretty normal looking hook. He went down, and 6 weeks later he was dead. Rest in peace, man. Fighters are too tough for their own good sometimes, man. Sometimes it's good to take a seat, do a little research. Just because you didn't black out, because that's what blacking out is. It's going into a coma, a temporary coma where you get knocked unconscious. Just because you didn't get knocked into a coma doesn't mean there's no adverse reaction going on in your brain. Doesn't mean there's no damage. Doesn't mean there's no concussion. This is one of the big problems with high school football too, man. These football players, they're all padded up, they got all this gear on, they got their helmets on, they go out there, they clash, boom! They get concussed, but they're still conscious. And the coach tells them, take a seat, take a little break before you go in for the next play. They go in for another play a few minutes later, boom! They get hit again. You can get concussed in American football multiple times in a single game. But nobody really thinks anything of it because they're not going unconscious. Oh, you're still conscious, so you're okay, right? Sounds like something my mom would have said when I was complaining about being sick when I was a kid. I can't go to school, I'm sick. You're still conscious, you're not sick enough. No, don't make me go. The sources on the internet are not looking out in your best interest in this regard, and so it's up to you, my friend, to take that step, to look out for the best interest of your brain. You get knocked down, that's a good telltale sign that damage has been done. Take a seat. What happens in the United States, for example? In most states, if you get knocked out, your fighter's license gets revoked for a minimum of 30 days. In most states. And that's a pretty smart thing. I know fighters don't like it because they're too tough for their own good and they want to keep getting in there and fighting and, making that money or having the glory, having the fame. But if you get knocked out, sitting it out, not taking any more blunt force trauma to the brain for 30 days as a bare minimum is a pretty good idea. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and train.